Welcome to Mondo, Agora on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Today we're going to be talking about serial killers and the lack of the state's ability to protect us from violent criminals of that stripe. It's going to be an ongoing conversation, which we're just going to be starting today. And I didn't know how long it was going to go. It ended up being just about Ted Bundy in this episode. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you. I've never been a big fan of what you would call true crime stories, but I've always been a big fan of movies. And recently I watched this, it was a made for TV movie called Deliberate Stranger, and it was about Ted Bundy, the serial killer. And I didn't really know too much about the case, but it kind of got me off on this line of thinking, set me on kind of a quest. Hope you join me, and I'll kind of try to explain it as we go. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. It may be between 2 to 5 episodes, depending on how long it takes me to go through these. This episode may be solely about Ted Bundy. It may be about a few, we'll see, depending on how fast it takes me to get through this. Anyway, Ted Bundy was convicted of killing 30 people in 7 states between 1974 and 1978. He had a really kind of a strange background because it wasn't the usual serial killer, beat by the dad. They say it traces his roots back to his family life, though, as his quote-unquote sister was actually his mom, and his grandparents, his parents were actually his grandparents. Never really found out who his dad was. When he found out that he was a bastard child, he was devastated, and it may have contributed to this, is what people say, which who cares, he made choices and he did some really, really terrible things. Don't make excuses for him. But, yeah, so it kind of starts out where he was kind of a weird guy anyway. In high school, he was a kind of a quiet loner type, but people generally thought he was okay. Apparently they thought he was good looking, but he was quiet. He didn't really do too much. He just kind of hung around in the background of different groups of people. He hung out with several different groups. He was kind of popular in a weird way, but not really outgoing, I guess is the right way to put it. But he was a chameleon as a person. He changed who he was completely. He decided that he wanted to be the popular type, so he kind of changed his whole character, and goes off to college. He meets this girl. He falls madly in love with her. She takes it as kind of a college sweetheart type of situation. She doesn't think that he's very mature and ends up breaking up with him before graduation, and this is devastating to him. This is kind of the point where he goes off the deep end. Now the movie Deliberate Stranger, because it was a made-for-TV movie, it didn't really show a whole lot of violence and gore or that kind of thing, even though he did really this really, really awful stuff. But what it did very well is it really showed the perspective of the people that were close to him around that time. Nobody expected it to be this guy. And because you never saw him do any of the stuff in the movie, you just kind of saw him, he would disappear sometimes, or you'd see him take people away. he used to lure people away, asking them for help. He had a fake cast on his arm, and like, hey, I need you to help me take my canoe down, or put my boat up, or get my bike off the back of my car, or something like that. And he would take him over to the car, hit him on the head, and throw them in the passenger seat, where he just removed the seat so they just kind of fell on the side of the car. Nobody could see them when they're going down the road. He'd just disappear with them. And another favorite way he would get people is he'd pretend to be a cop. So anyway, he after his girlfriend breaks up with him, he changes his character to meet the expectation of the guy that she wants. It's his ultimate plan, and this part is pretty funny, I think, in a kind of grim way. Is he's going to get her back, and the same way that she got him, he's going to make her feel as bad. So he changes his whole character, his whole personality. He starts going to study psychology, and then he goes into law. And he keeps talking to, he starts dating this girl in college, and he keeps talking to his old girlfriend. And he eventually convinces her to start dating him again. But he doesn't tell the other girl. They don't know about each other, so he's dating both these women. And he gets to the point where he asks his old girlfriend to marry him. And when she agreed, is when he cut off all connections with her, just kind of stopped talking to her, dropped her like a hot potato. And I mean, that's pretty funny. I mean, all guys have kind of thought about doing something kind of like that, I guess, kind of angry at the girl that you were going out with because she broke up with you. If you could get her back and then just like break it off with her and make her feel as bad as you did. Every guy's kind of had that inclination. And he actually pulled it off, but he also did some really, really, really terrible things on top of that. And we're going to kind of go into that because his first girlfriend, his original girlfriend from college, first I went to college, she wore her hair a very specific way. It was dark hair, it was parted in the middle, it was long, shoulder length or longer, and that was kind of his type. Most guys, or a lot of guys, they kind of have a type, what they find attractive. They'll repeatedly date girls that have this quality. He used that quality for something a lot more sinister. And he murdered and raped and tormented, 30 plus women across multiple states. And that's one of the reasons it took him so long to catch this guy, because he traveled around a lot. And, a bunch of people were looking for him, but they didn't all know they were all looking for the same guy. And one day, his luck started running out on him. He was driving back through town, through this, I think he was driving back home from a mountain resort. And he gets pulled over, he's swerving or something. A cop pulls him over, they check his car, and they find a ski mask, a crowbar, gloves. They think it's a robbery kit. So they bring him into the station for questioning. They arrest him for robbery. Prior to his bust by the Utah Highway Patrol, the Washington State Police were having a very hard time catching Mr. Bundy. Don't know if I should call him that. Anyway, they had a few ideas, a few things of information that they knew about, and that was there's one crime scene where two people disappeared. These two women disappeared, separate incidents the same day. The name was floating around of Ted, this guy with dark hair and a tan Volvo named Ted was asking for help. He had a sling on his arm, cast on his arm. A few other people called and actually directly said, you should check out this guy named Ted Bundy. And the cops, they really didn't. They didn't think, hey, this guy, he is a lawyer, or he's going to be a lawyer, he's going to law school. He's an active member of the Republican Party. And he was an up-and-coming politician. So you know how those people can be trustworthy. I think he helped the governor get elected. He had, a lot of political support once he did get arrested. This guy couldn't have been it. He couldn't have been who you're looking for. He's too good of a guy, too nice of a guy. He's one of us, type of things. And a lot of people behind him. And even when they found out who he was, a lot of people were still behind him. It was this weird cult phenomenon around him. So they had a few other people call in and say, check out this guy Ted Bundy. Cops didn't. Even the girlfriend that he was dating when he started killing the girl, he was the new girlfriend, not the original girlfriend. He was killing people that looked like he was the other girlfriend he was dating at the time. Also called in and said that she found some plaster of Paris in his medicine cabinet, which could be used for making a fake cast. They blew it off as usual until he was arrested in Utah. They found road maps, ski resort information and stuff, things proving that he was in these places where murders took place. They had gas receipts. They searched his house. They found very little, though. Just those basic things were the only things they had that really connected him to these crimes. They didn't really have enough information to hold him, so they let him out in his own reconnaissance. They just let him go. Take care of yourself. But they did place him under surveillance, give him a little bit of credit. And he did stuff like wash his car right in front of them. So he taunted him. Thought he was a really smart guy. So what were the Washington State investigators supposed to do with all this data coming in, especially all this false data, even though they had all this correct data also? How would they organize it? They spent a ton of taxpayer money on something that was unusual at the time called a computer. And they got this large, I think it was a payroll computer, and they used it to put in all the information, all the names and everything, and they narrowed it down to the best 100 suspects. And right at the top of that list was Ted Bundy. But they didn't really check him out until after he was arrested in this car incident. So the cops picked up Ted Bundy for a lineup, and this was in relation to an attempted kidnapping of a young woman by a quote-unquote police officer named Officer Roseland, who was actually Ted Bundy in disguise. The woman picks Ted Bundy out of a lineup, and agreeing with his lawyer, he pleads out. They arrest him. They throw him. He, loses the trial. They throw him in jail for this crime, and he is caught hiding in the bushes with a map and what they call an escape kit. So they throw him in the hole. So maybe this is somebody we should watch out for. So in Aspen, Colorado, he is charged with a murder, and there's really not much evidence. It's almost all circumstantial. He waives his extradition rights, and they send him over there to wait trial there. And he decides to be his own lawyer. He's preparing his own defense, and he goes to the law library they have there at the courthouse. And they leave him there by himself, which is a brilliant idea for an accused murderer and somebody who already looked like they were going to attempt to escape. And he jumps out of a window and escapes. He gets away. He spends the cops spend a few days looking for him, completely embarrassed. He spends a few days hiding in the woods, running around at random almost, eating stolen food from campers, just barely making it. And he stumbles out into the road and steals a car and ends up getting picked up at a traffic roadblock. So they take him back to jail, and before he escaped, there was a good chance that he was actually going to win that trial. He was doing really well as a lawyer. His inexperience, though, made it so he did not recognize that he was about to win, and he was worried, and that's why he escaped. But after he escaped, there's really no doubt in people's minds. This guy is guilty of murder. That's why he escaped. Of course, he hey, I'm innocent, and I try to escape because I'm innocent. I was, just trying to get away from being accused of such a heinous thing, because it wasn't me. So they put this guy who is obviously a flight risk in prison, still waiting his trial, and he steals a saw blade, like a little wood saw blade from the workshop at the prison, because he should have access to that kind of stuff. Takes it to his cell, and he cuts a small hole in the ceiling, just big enough for him to squeeze through. And at night, he sneaks through, and happens to be when the prison guard who lives there happens to be out at night. He was out, I don't know, doing something on a date or something. Doesn't matter. So he just walks right out that guy's door into the snow, and he's gone. And nobody notices until lunchtime the next day. So, this guy that has tried to escape once before, maybe even twice before, we should probably keep a better eye on him for that. Maybe look in on him in the morning at some point. But, he escapes, and he goes down to Florida, and 2 weeks later, he's starting to kill again. He's gotten back into the groove of walking around looking in people's windows, stealing stuff, and finally he breaks into a sorority house and attacks 4 people. 2 people die before anyone shows up to help. I think 1 dies later. Maybe 1 survives. It's a terrible, terrible scene. He bludgeoned these people to death. He sexually assaulted these women. I think he raped one of them. He was also known, he didn't do it at this time, but he was also known for necrophilia. He was a really disgusting person. And a couple weeks later, he commits his last murder, which was a 12-year-old girl, I think, maybe 14. She was young. He, killed her. And it was just terrible. He took a van, he stole a van from a university, and then he picked this girl up, took her out to the woods, and killed her. And that was the one that really worried people, made people the most angry. Because it was a young girl, and it was the only time he killed anybody really young. besides maybe his first victim when he was also really young. That's kind of disputed. Some people, they're not really sure when he started killing people. He could have been 16, he could have been 8, he could have been 20 something. Nobody's really sure. He never really said. In fact, when he was being taken to the electric chamber, to electric chair, to be put to death at the end of his life, he was confessing to crimes that he hadn't confessed to yet. So, somewhere between 30 and 40 victims. This terrible, terrible guy. And 4 or 5 of them happened because the cops let him escape. I mean, how can you let a serial killer, a known serial killer, he was definitely a known serial killer the second time he escaped from prison. That is their fault. Those deaths are on the hands of the state, and they do not take credit for it. And they say, people argue for the state. They protect us from monsters like Ted Bundy. Who's going to protect us from the serial killers, the murderer, rapist, these awful, awful human beings? They don't. Those people happen despite the state, and the state almost makes it worse. I mean, that guy pretended to be a cop to pick up people, to kill them, and that's not an unusual strategy that these people use. Ted Bundy was an evil, evil man, and he was a politician. That makes sense. I mean, if he hadn't been caught, he may have become president, who knows. But he was a disgusting, conniving, thieving, murdering rapist. And he doesn't deserve people's attention as far as admiration in any sort of way. Later on, after his arrest, before his death, the Christian right, who he was already associated with, used him to fight pornography. They had him saying that he did the things he did because of pornography, even though when they raided his house and searched everything he had, they didn't really find porn. They found like pictures of young girls in cheerleading outfits or something like that, magazines about stuff like that, that weren't even like Playboy level pornography. It wasn't even like showing boobs or anything. It was just, they were clothed, they were just kind of young, and that was his thing. But he was still a pervert, Being a pervert's okay. Can't kill people though. I mean, he was a murdering rapist. It doesn't get much lower than that. He hated women, and women loved him. How does that make sense? I guess this is about all the time I have for today. Next time, maybe we'll get more than one done. I'll probably be covering John Wayne Gacy, who was a Democrat. So check that out. The brilliantly atmospheric, minimalistic music that you just heard was from Chris Zabrinsky. It's from his album, appropriately titled, at least for this episode, Undercover Vampire Policeman. The tracks used were track 1, Temptation of the Air of the Bow of the Calentan. Track 4, Nirvana Vivo. Track 2, John Stockton Slow Drag. Track 6, the kid in 4th grade who really liked the Denver Broncos. And track 7, the Undercover Vampire Policeman. If you like it, go check them out. I'll leave a link in the notes at the bottom of the page. It's pretty cool stuff, and he does some electro type music too. It's really cool. Check him out.